Hello automation friends, this is RPA Fridays 32. This time the session is called Beautiful UiPath Workflows and how to think about your future selves. So this time it will be a bit of a different video. Usually I'm showing some use case, I'm showing how to do stuff or some sample project, but this time we will be talking about something else. So let me firstly introduce myself for those who don't know me. My name is Roman. I'm from Robot ICT company from Czech Republic, where we do RPA, process automation, network automation, lots of stuff. Anything you want to automate, let me know, right? So that's me, that's us, and today we will be talking in short about how to make your UiPath workflows beautiful, understandable, and manageable. In world of programming, we often talk about nice code, clean code, right? But we don't really write code in UiPath. We build workflows. So we can call this video, it's about workflows, guidelines, maybe some tips and tricks. It will be a little bit of this and a little bit of that, such a mixture of maybe my experience, what weird workflows I saw during my career, and maybe how to improve your workflows to be just better. Here is an outline of today's session. I will start with some practical examples. Let's start with something real, with something visual, nicely you can see. And then I will be pretty much talking a bit about naming conventions. There's a little chapter called Don't Be Selfish, documentation, and the last chapter is log messages. Oh, it's not very last. Then the cherry on the top, we will be looking at what is a workflow analyzer. So wait for it. It will be cool. Let's start with the practical examples. I have three: unnecessary activities, flowcharts, nested sequences, and control flow activities. Let's take a look. So the first example I called unnecessary activities, what I've seen. So this example can maybe be connected to something else, right? But it's a simple example to maybe ring your bell, to build a connection, to maybe change your thinking about things. So it's very easy. We have an application, a calculator that starts, and then the only task here is to click a number 1 button, okay? And what is here, what you can see is that firstly there is a check app state activity that is checking for the button if it exists, if it's there, right? And only after it knows that the target appears, it will click the button 1. What will happen if the target will not appear? It will throw a custom application exception error with the message number 1 is not present. You would say that's really neat. That's going one step further. That means we are really sure about that the number 1 is there. But the reality is this is a extra code that it's unnecessary. The only thing that we need here is the click activity, because the click activity will take care about all this for us. If the button number 1 is not present, then the application exception will be thrown anyway. So this check app state activity is unnecessary. And the only thing we need here is the activity click. And this little guy we can delete. Much nicer, right? And the function, the result is the same. We can use the check app state or find element or wait for an element for different cases. But this thing, I've seen it around, is just a way how to make things easier. So do not build special checks where we know that actually UiPath itself will do the check for us and will throw the same level of error in case there is a problem. Next example, flowcharts. Some of you guys love flowcharts. For some scenarios, flowcharts are really good, really powerful, especially if you have a complicated logic, but they always are a bit challenging in terms of understanding what is where, naming, and so on. So what we see here is a very messy flowchart. So first what we will do is to make it look nicer. But really, trust me, I've seen for people who claim to do things for years and years, such ugly and chaotic flowcharts that they went down and up and down like a snake, right? And around the corner and crazy. So now it looks much better. And how we can improve the flowchart itself? Well, firstly, we see that there is some sequence that has a generic name and there's nothing happening really, but if I'm including bigger, let's say, sets of activities in sequences inside the flowchart, it's good to call the sequence what's going on. For example, I don't know, starting the app. This way I know what's going on inside, and I don't have to go inside, double click to view what's going on. It's simple as that. Then I'm sometimes doing the same for the log message, because if I want to access the log message, I need to always look in the properties, then open the message itself. There is no message yet. But if I just want to know from the first view what's going on, maybe I want to also include it in the name, like, I don't know, app started. Yeah, maybe it's too long, so I can use Shift F2 to put an annotation, log the app start time. And it's not only for the log message, right? You can help yourself to build a nicer flowchart by doing the same for the other activities, right? Just think about saving yourself time by double click and opening the activities, opening the sequences for the future, your future selves, by giving these activities and these blocks general better names. Here again, 2 activities called click. They are missing something very important. They're missing some description. So let's say click, I don't know, menu, and this would be click save, for example. So already now I have much better view on what's going on. Unfortunately, in flowchart we can't see the activities kind of open. We always need to double click to view it, to see something or nothing, and then it makes things much better. The nice thing about flowchart also is that we can keep some activities just laying around here, but maybe that's a different story. Good. Third example, the very nested sequence. Oof. So once you will start building some more complex sequences, and you will start nest sequences into each other and start having lots of branches, if conditions, maybe do while for each window, this and that, and it will be a big complex thing. You will start having very nested sequences that will end by these plus 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 and lots of yeah, it will just start to look ugly. So from first sight, the rule number 1 is, if a sequence contains only one activity, right? This example, for example, here's a sequence called do. It ends here. If it has only one activity inside, then we can take the activity and use it without the parent, without the closing sequence. If you want, you can keep the sequence in case you want to define a scope for variables in that part of the code. But if you don't need to define variables on that scope, then what you can do is to take the only activity inside the sequence, hit Ctrl X, right, to cut it, then click on the now really empty sequence, delete it by a delete button, click in the void here, drop activity here, Ctrl V, like a victory, and voila, you have now much nicer workflow. And if I continue with this, I see there is another sequence that has only one activity, and I'm not willing to add any more. So I can do the same. Ctrl X, delete the empty sequence, click in the void, Ctrl V as a victory, and voila, much better. Ooh, cool, I can do the same here. So look, Ctrl X, delete, Ctrl V, Ctrl X, oh, now it's hidden, delete, Ctrl V. A bit of a mouse clicks and the workflow now looks much cleaner. Also, what you can do is that if you, for example, have a really workflow that goes to sides, right, it becomes horizontally unbearable, then sometimes you can, of course, collapse some of these parts to make it better. For example, if I collapse this log message, I probably know what's going on, or I can still rename it. It becomes much smaller, and it's not that important for me to have it in full width. Never mind. So these were 3 examples that we start with. And now it will be more of a boring theory, but important theory. So stay with me, please. Naming conventions. These will be some advices, and the first major best advice for you is to use English language for anything. The world of technology, programming, UiPath, whatever, anywhere where it seems like there is something with computers, use English as a universal language to understand each other, to understand what's going on. Because we are living in a global world where maybe our code will be later in few years, or our workflows will be maintained by somebody who don't know our native language. And trust me, it's not funny to try to fix a code which is in unknown language and the variables and names and comments are in, I don't know, Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese, so that could be really challenging. So please, 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 for anything, if possible, use English. There could be one little exception. That could be that you are saving something, or you are describing something, some button, or something that it's really hard to translate. And for all the best case, it may be sometimes make sense to use the original language. For example, if the app itself is in a foreign language, that is that could be. Right, then we have file names, like the names of our XAML files, workflows. Please, let's agree not to use spaces. Spaces in general are causing chaos, causing troubles. Sometimes when writing some script with paths, it's maybe it can happen 1 from 10 times, but spaces always bring some troubles, as well as special characters. Right? So we already agreed to use English. English luckily doesn't have any special characters that can break things. Maybe apostrophes, but please don't use them. I think it's not even allowed in file names, and luckily. But then please do not use spaces. It should be called like a name of the app and then the purpose of the workflow. So for example, Outlook_open. Yeah, the underscore is not mandatory. It could be Outlook open altogether, whatever. But this is a nice way how to do it and how to differentiate it. Not saying that you can also then group your files based on the app into separate folders. But that's not naming convention. That's more like a project convention. Then let's talk briefly about variables, if I still have you there. So there are some common conventions about variables in, let's say, programming world, as well as in UiPath. And I would like to point that the variables should be at first descriptive. That means that they should describe what data they contain. For example, number of invoice, or user address, city. Okay, so we don't like variables like variable1 or no, var, name, dt, or data table, right? Like calling a data table variable data table. No, please no. Let's call it what it is. If it's a table of clients, let's call it clients. Don't be afraid of calling things what they are. And please, keep one casing within the same project. Choose camel case, that means first letter is small and the another word is big capital letter, or snake case when you divide the words with the underscore, but just keep it same within one project. There is no one rule for that. Just try to keep things nice. Good, that was naming conventions part number 1. Now naming conventions part number 2. Sometimes it's cool to actually put the prefixes for your arguments. Arguments are kind of variables that are used to pass data between workflows. So to make it more understandable what's going on with them, you can actually include the direction in their names using in, out, or IO, like in and out prefixes. Also the activities. We have a very good general rule. Do not have the 2 activities with the same name in one workflow. So imagine you have lots of activities and they are all called assign. And then you have an error. You maybe can't really see it running as unattended robot. You will get an error, and then there will be the name of the activity assign. Really helpful, right? You really have no idea where it happens unless you put a log message between each of the assign. True, yes. But please, in generic, change the generic name of the activity to something. What is it going on? Click, then edit the name and add where is it clicking. Click, I don't know, menu, open, close, whatever. Add more info. So that's the general rule. There should not be the generic names of the activities. For example, assign convert to a decimal number. Also, where there is some complicated thing happening, like maybe assign that's using with lambda function or with some complicated methods. Use annotations, Shift F2, to describe what's going on. The more description you will put in your code, the better for you or potentially anyone else fixing your code in the future. So that brings us to this chapter, that the workflow is not only for you. So if you're already a few years working in RPA or anything, you may come back to your code, your old code, and trying to fix something after years that it was running just nicely. Like, congratulations on that, but still, you probably did not really remember you wrote it. Our brain works like that. We don't store every details. So in the moment you're writing the code, you feel like you have the full control. You know every bit of it, every corner, every specialty, every weird variable, and why is it there, and so on. But imagine somebody else is looking at your code. It's maybe something worth to do is a peer review. So you will show your code to your colleague, and if the colleague is staring at it like, yeah, what's that? Then probably you wrote an hard to understand code, or you did not annotate it, or you did not describe it, and it's hard to maintain. So imagine yourself or your junior colleague trying to understand your code, or eventually fixing your code. I mean, the code can be right, but there has to be an update, or the robot needs some recap. So yeah, please. Now, almost at the end, documentation. And again, here I would love to say, please, if possible, keep the documentation in language, English, okay? Because it's universal, it's simple language, and most of the tech people are know English. Of course, you can have clients in your region. Maybe, I don't know, you're in Germany, you have German clients, and you want to share with them the documentation. The documentation is not only about solution design document, but it's a business rule description, and you want to have them signed that, yeah, this is how we want it, this is how the robot should be working. So yeah, that's totally cool. But if possible, maybe on the other more technical documents, let's keep things in universal language, that is English, right? We were talking about solution design document. That is something here that we should keep updated if we change it, because there could be some draft, there could be some idea of how I will build the process, and then during the time I may be changing my mind, maybe I'm doing some changes. So it's cool to keep it updated, right? Because what is the documentation good for if it's not actual, if it's not related, if it's old and the process and the code itself is different, then it's for nothing, then it's just only confusing. So what is really cool is to take a pen and a paper, or maybe some tool like Visio, Drawio, or Miro, actually nice tool to draw workflows, diagrams, and this can help not only to you to understand top level the process, but also to somebody else to understand what's going on. So another little here is about log messages. So try to put log message at the start and the end of each workflow. It will really help. It can be called, like, for example, Outlook close started, then something is going on, and then Outlook close ended. You can prefix each log message with the name of the workflow. This really helps you to understand in the amount of log messages in the orchestrator what's going on, to which file the log message belongs. Really, it's not bad to have more log messages than less. It will really help you. You can always filter it, you can always download it, you can always do some thing about it, right? Export it to CSV and then look through it. But it's always good to have log messages, especially here in the second point, in every branching point. So if there's or there's a flow decision, then we want to have a log message in both of the branches, or at least one, right? So we know just from the log messages from orchestrator what path the robot took. Now, cherry on the top of the cake, the workflow analyzer. The workflow analyzer sits in UiPath Studio under this button, Analyze File. If you click at that, it will analyze the project for some errors and will actually tell you what's wrong or what's good. And I don't have that many problems here because I fixed most of them myself. But there are some interesting things that this analyzer is checking for, some rules. For example, activity for each has a default name, right? We talked about it, that it's good to not have default names of activities. So, or activity log message has a default name. And then there are many of these rules. If you want to see what rules there are, then you hit this little arrow, Workflow Analyzer Settings. This will open project settings, so you know it's actually hiding in the project settings. And here are the rules for workflow analyzers. You can see all of them, you can click on it, it has all documentation, and you can change it. So you can create your own set of rules for your workflow if you want. There are something like nested variables, hard-coded timeout, and so on. All these are warning, or there are some troubles that are potentially wrong. So if you want to do just a general check on your code, suppose you have a big project and now you're like, cool, let's clean it up a bit, let's see where are the possible problems, then UiPath provided workflow analyzers for you. So I hope you like it. I hope you found something new, you learned something new, and this is the end of this session. Any questions you might have, any opinions on this, maybe your tricks how to keep your workflows clean and nice, fill into the comment section. I will be really happy to read it and to answer your questions. And as always, I wish you have a good code. I wish you to really, if you want to fix bug to somebody else's code, that these workflows will be good and readable, and you will have a nice time and not really pain. And I would like to invite you to Robot ICT Community Forum. You can also ask questions here. You can learn some stuff. I publish some articles here, and will be really happy if you can join. Consider subscription to our channel. And as always, I wish you happy automation.